News has learned some cases aren't being scheduled till 2027.
You must put these cases as a priority. There must be a court available for them, a judge available for them. Increase the funding for those who deal with these cases. We need more specially trained police officers. We need more specially trained barristers to prosecute and defend.
Emmy's trial eventually went ahead this year. The defendant was found not guilty. Afterwards, the judge wrote to her and acknowledged the 5-year wait.
You've had to suffer emotionally distressing and inordinate delay. The delay is
The Ministry of Justice told us they've inherited a criminal justice system crisis, with cases delayed for far too long. They say they'll address this deep injustice to fast-track rape cases so victims and survivors have the experience they deserve. But for those waiting, it feels like their lives are on hold. Ashna Harinag, Sky News.
Finally, it's been a day of sporting records and record breakers.
Nadal is the US Open champion. The trophy cabinet is complete.
Tennis great Rafael Nadal has announced he will retire from the sport next month. The Spaniard won an incredible 22 men's singles Grand Slam titles, including a record 14 French Open victories. He was also a double Olympic gold medalist and helped Spain win the Davis Cup 4 times. And more records tumbled in the first test in Pakistan. Harry Brook became the first English player to score a triple century for 34 years, as England declared on 823 for 7, the 4th highest score of all time. Brook and Joe Root put on 454 together, England's highest ever partnership. And Root also became the first Englishman to score 20,000 international runs. Congratulations to them. Now, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the political commentator Benedict Spence and the Labour peer and broadcaster Baroness Hazarika. Amongst the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Metro after Hurricane Milton did much less damage to Florida than had initially been feared. The headline there, few. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.
what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
I want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes. Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. At least 11 people have died after Hurricane Milton passed through Florida. But authorities say the devastation could have been far worse. The Princess of Wales appeared alongside her husband, William, for the first time in public since her cancer diagnosis, as the pair met first responders and the parents of the victims of the Southport stabbings. And Hezbollah says senior leader Wafiq Safar has survived an Israeli assassination attempt in Beirut, with Lebanese officials saying at least 18 people were killed in the strike. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages of the newspapers as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the political commentator Benedict Spence and the Labour peer and broadcaster Baroness Hazarika. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Beginning with the aftermath of Hurricane Milton, and few is the Metro's headline, after Florida escaped the worst-case scenario widely predicted before the hurricane struck. The Guardian leads with claims by the United Nations that Israel deliberately fired on UN peacekeepers in Lebanon, which, if proved, would be a grave violation of international law. The Mail reports that Chancellor Rachel Reeves has been warned by HMRC that if she raises capital gains tax, it will actually cost the government billions of pounds in lost revenue. The Times says that Sir Keir Starmer is to give unions more rights in the workplace, so making it easier for them to raise funds for Labour. The Telegraph reports that the government is planning to use private hospitals to help reduce NHS waiting lists. While the Eye says care workers are to get a pay rise under a new law introduced by Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner. The Express carries a warning from campaigners that pensioners face an impossible choice between heating or eating without their winter fuel allowance this year. The Financial Times International edition reports that the new boss of HSBC is considering shedding a layer of senior bankers to try to save $300 million in costs. The Sun pictures the Princess of Wales on her visit to Southport today with her husband, and the headline, "We're here for you." While the Star recruits Only Fools and Horses star Sir David Jason in a campaign to save classic insults such as git and plonker, which the paper claims are under threat. I haven't heard those for a while. It is true. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Benedict Spence and Ayesha Hazarika. Welcome to you both. We're going to start with workers' rights. Front page of the Times, and the Labour bill being put through, although it could take some 2 years to actually come to full fruition. But the line that they're looking at here is that Labour's going to make it easier for unions to raise funds for the Labour Party.
Well, look, I mean, there's lots in this bill, and Labour's had, fair to say, some successes, but quite a difficult time in its first 100 days. And I think a lot of people across the Labour movement will be very pleased about this bill for workers' rights coming in just under the 100 days. Now, the focus of this piece is that unions are going to be given wider powers to recruit members and stage strikes, and that workers will be told about their right to join a union and have representatives have the right to enter workplaces and recruit and organise. Now, a Conservative minister comes in and says, this is all terrible and Labour's taking the country back to the 1970s. I really push back against this. Now, you would say that, wouldn't you? You're a Labour peer. But I really push back against this sort of characterisation of a demonisation of trade unions. Trade unions exist to stand up for ordinary men and women in the workplace. you just look at some of the real scandals that people across the political spectrum were absolutely disgusted by. Take the P&O ferries, the way people were sacked via text message. They were sort of fired and then rehired on worse terms. We've looked at terrible cases like what's happened in Harrods in terms of sexual harassment in the workplace. This bill is a very wide-ranging bill which tackles lots of things, including the two issues I've just sort of talked about. And I think this idea of constantly demonising trade unions is very, very regressive. Trade unions are something which are part of a civilised society. They are the strong friend at work for many people who don't have an agent or they can't afford a lawyer or something like that. The trade unions have been responsible for making big advances in our country's working practices, from having weekends to health and safety in the workplace. So I think there's a lot of good stuff in this bill, but I would push back against this angle, which is really trying to demonise trade unions. I think for a lot of people, they would like to have better protections at work, and that's good for employees, but it's also good for organisations. If you want to have a productive workforce, having a workforce which is, I wouldn't say jazz hands happy, but content and not being sort of abused is a good thing.
Benedict, do you think Aisha's correct in her analysis there that this particular article highlighting the sort of fundraising element for Labour, do you think that's really kind of demonising unions?
I mean, I think it's wrong to say that Labour are trying to take us back to the 1970s, because for a start we had industries to speak of in the 1970s and most of those have been gutted, a lot of it on the watch of the Conservatives, it must be said. So it's a very different sort of industrial landscape to back in the day. And I think a lot of what Aisha says about the work of trade unions is true. There's no question that actually trade unions have done a lot to improve the lots and life of people in this country. But I also think at the same time, you have to look at the broad economic landscape of this country and recognise, realistically, we have been in something of a recession, actually, for the best part of a decade. And there are real issues around all sorts of businesses. And I would say, ultimately, the thing that a lot of businesses do not feel from this incoming government is that they are particularly friendly towards the idea of wealth creation or even broadly economic growth, that it's much more about sort of doubling down on what you already have. And that's fine up until a point. You can understand why. We're a first world country. There are many sort of hard fought for rights that people have, and they feel that they can go further. And we have seen examples in recent years of people being mistreated, and that's all fine. But actually, if you want to sort of enjoy the fruits of that long term, you need to sustain that with economic growth. You don't get that ultimately by making it harder for companies to cut the cloth if they're not making money. And on top of that, of course, we've got discussions ongoing about how it is that the government is going to raise money. Well, there's talk about potentially increasing national insurance contributions from employers. If you sort of combine that with saying employers are going to have to pay more, even though workers might not, of course, that does end up getting passed on to the workers, and it also gets passed on to consumers as well. But then juxtapose that with the government saying, oh, and by the way, it's going to be really hard for you, much harder than perhaps it should be, to dismiss people. And that's because people have misbehaved in the past and treated people awfully. But you might be a very good employer, but need to cut your cloth, but it's going to be very difficult and quite expensive for you to perhaps shed your workforce to keep afloat.
But
that's not going to be good. No, that's not going to be good.
Isn't it important to care about the rights of workers,
not if the businesses go under. That's the key thing here. And I think people really, and we'll get on to another story that is going to affect a lot of this later on. I think people really do not quite understand quite how close to the edge a lot of small and medium businesses are in this country, how little, rather, space they actually have to work with, and how, as much as we all have to say, yes, obviously, a lot of workers have been underpaid for a long time in this country, train drivers especially, nurses, teachers, etc. That's because there isn't enough wealth in the country to go around. There is a problem with wealth creation in this country, and actually that has to come first before you can then say, let's get back to the world-class services that we want. If you don't have the wealth to pay for that, you won't have it in the first place.
But it shouldn't be one or the other.
I was just going to make that point. I think it's very understandable. It's very easy to pit these two things against each other. If anything, this new Labour government has come under fierce criticism, ironically, from some union leaders like Unite, for example, which is a very big union, saying they're too pro-business, they're too pro-wealth creation. They are, they're having this big investment summit coming. In fact, they've just appointed a new minister for investment this evening. So I think I would push back against this government not wanting to be supporters of wealth creation. But I think the other thing is, sometimes there is this kind of feeling
Benedict's
that workers are always pit. Hang on, just a minute.
We're going to move on.
But just that workers are always pit against trade union people and employees. And that's, I mean, if you look, for example, there's a great Labour MP, Jack Dromey. He was a great trade unionist. He died, sadly, a couple of years ago. I always remember when the automotive industry was going through a really, really difficult period, he was working along trade union leaders to work with the kind of manufacturers, to actually work with the workers to say, look, we are having real production issues at the moment. The business is going through a hard time. And they actually came together to reduce hours, but actually keep as many workers as possible. And they helped those bosses through a difficult time. So I think sometimes we can sort of pit these two groups of people against each other, and actually most good bosses want to keep as many people and work as possible.
OK, just because we're running out of time, we're going to move on to a different topic, but there'll be more opportunity to discuss and debate. Let's move on to the Telegraph, and this story about Tory centrists are really not very happy with the two Conservative candidates that they're presented with, and some are not even going to bother to vote.
Yeah. How about that? Honestly, this entire thing has just been a bit of a fiasco. The suggestions that there was vote sharing and people trying to be very clever and then not realising, oh, we don't quite have as many MPs as we thought we did. You know, it turns out Rishi Sunak's assertion that there isn't very good maths education in this country was very prophetic and felt far closer to home amongst his own MPs. I mean, look, the reality is there was no real talent in terms of the candidates for this Tory leadership contest. I know that it might sound quite flippant, but they are really not very good compared to perhaps previous leadership contests, certainly not to when David Cameron was the leader or even Theresa May. This is a very different calibre of individual, but I also think it shows a degree of the childishness, actually, that exists in the Conservative Party, that you have the so-called sensibles going, well, we're not getting our way, so we're just not going to vote for either of these two people. Actually, if you look at the two sides that are arguing about this Tory leadership contest, you've got lots of people who are either on the left or the right saying that Kemi Badenoch is the opposite of what they are, but she's a conviction politician, and therefore they're not going to vote for her because that's dangerous. And on the other side, you have people saying, Robert Jenrick is a snake oil salesman and he'll say absolutely anything to get elected, but he's the lesser of two evils because he doesn't believe in anything, so they're going to vote for him. Neither of these are good options. I don't really see why these people are throwing their toys out of the pram. What did they expect? It was a disastrous election campaign. It is a very small pot from which they have to choose to, and they played a very silly game in trying to get their man the better of the two candidates in James Cleverly, and it's come back to bite them.
I mean, I suppose, what purpose does it serve now that the Tory Reform Group are refusing to endorse either candidate that they have?
Well, I just very much agree with what Benedict has said. I mean, it does seem, first of all, to completely mess up this contest. I know everyone's kind of denying it now, but to like mess up I mean, to have just lost a lead in a general election really, really badly, and actually, you know, and I'll say this as a Labour person, to have had a new Labour government facing some difficulties and to manage to mess up your own very simple leadership contest with only 121 members of the Conservative Party is really quite, particularly after James Cleverly, bless him, was doing a bit of a victory lap the other night, saying, you know, it's in the bag sort of thing. So I do agree. I think it looks kind of really ridiculous to suddenly be like, we completely messed this up and now we're not playing anymore.
Look on the bright side. There's a Tory leadership contest every 18 months, so they're not going to be stuck with whoever it is. You can just try again.
I mean, James Cleverly might be back.
Who knows? Might be Rishi again. It might be Rishi. It might be
Oh my goodness! You're making it up now as you go along.
That would be too much punishment, even for poor Rishi.
He doesn't deserve it. Or maybe he does. I don't know.
Benedict and Aisha, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, how long is too long for a book? We'll turn the page and discuss that after the break. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. When you think of Glastonbury, it's mud you want and music. They're going to cross to us live in a minute. Okay. Thank you so much. Brad Pitt is now a prolific producer behind the scenes.
It's not a mystery to me. We always were capable of doing this.
Oh, they're wonderful children as an audience.
Who did that? Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise. This is the story of the night.
It's the little independent film that could.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
Nor have I ever struck any woman in my life. There's this illusion of power.
Are you feeling well?
I remember covering the Oscars and that now infamous moment, the Will Smith slap. Nobody could quite believe that it had happened. You can tell from these crowds just how excited people are for the return of Pride.
These actors playing the lead roles were born long after the Sex Pistols broke up.
Are you pleased that you did say yes to the job?
I've never regretted it.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Don't leave me.
Yeah, okay.
There's no easy goodies. There's no easy baddies.
I've had a great time here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me, Benedict Spence, and Baroness Hazarika. Taking us through the papers, we're going to have a look at the Sun, first of all, and it's really the photo that tells the story. And this is the Princess of Wales, her first public engagement since her cancer diagnosis with William. They both visited families of the victims of the Southport stabbings on Merseyside.
Yes, it's one of those things where you don't want to say it's a very nice thing to see her out and about, even though it is, because, of course, it's a very serious and very poignant thing to make that the first public engagement. And, you know, it's very easy to sort of dismiss what the functionaries that the royal family often do, you know, sort of dismiss them as being people who go out and open things and, you know, shake hands and all that sort of thing. But they do play a very important role when it comes to the suffering of the nation and the healing of the nation. And that's something I think often we don't give them credit for. And often a lot of people can be very churlish about the role that they play. But be it this or be it other disasters that have happened in the past, actually they prove regularly to be very good at being able to judge moods and talk to people on a very human level. Obviously, Kate has been through her own very serious health struggles recently, so it is great to see her about and see her healthy, given all the sort of, you know, the conjecture that was swirling around at the time, and her having to come out and face the public in that way, which was slightly torturous to I think everybody to have to watch this person put themselves through that. But as you can see, doing a very important job, going out and, you know, talking to these people, letting them know that they haven't been forgotten, because we often, you know, we are here, we're working in the media industry, and we know how quickly actually stories can get filtered straight out of the cycle once they drop slightly off the front pages. And it is important, I think, for these people to understand, that community to understand that, look, actually people in power and authority are still paying attention and are still listening, and the spotlight has not gone away from them.
And I think that the people were really appreciative. We see the emergency workers that they met also, because it was supposed to be just the Prince of Wales that was to make the visit, so it was a last-minute visit, including the Princess of Wales. So they were really appreciative that she came along as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would have been a lovely surprise for people there, and agree with everything that Benedict has said. It is great to see her looking so well, looking very healthy and happy. And I think for that community, they have been through so much, you know, for the families who lost those wee girls, for the many people who are injured. You know, we forget about, it wasn't just people who lost their lives. A lot of people had kind of life-changing injuries. And I think the mental scars from what, you know, people who might not have been hurt, but what they witnessed, and the proximity to that horrible event. And then, of course, the riots that happened afterwards, you know, a sort of touch paper was lit across the country. And we almost forgot about those people and that community and those families. So I think it's particularly moving that she has decided to make that her first visit.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's greatly appreciated.
Yes, no, it is indeed. Very quickly, we're going to talk about books now. Front page of the Times. Is 300 pages, is that too long for a book? This is the assertion from Ian Rankin. He's saying that, you know, after 300 pages, it's unnecessary.
Well, I don't know. I don't read a lot of crime novels. I don't read a lot of those sort of murder mysteries. I assume that it depends on your skill of being able to sort of weave the mystery in. But if it's particularly multi-layered, maybe you do need more than 3 pages. I don't know. It depends sort of how many elements there are.
I think you need more than 3 pages.
Oh, sorry, yeah, more than 3. 300 pages, yes. That's what Ian Rankin is saying. But he ought to know he's written at least 3 books, possibly as many as 300. I think he's actually written rather a lot of books. But, yeah, I don't know. Do you think...
I totally agree with Ian Rankin. So I have to review quite a lot of books for cultural things, which I do love, but because we are busy political media people, our brain capacity is very, very short. And actually, it is a lot to sit down. And I think 300... I also have a thing about going to plays. I love going to the theatre.
And Benedict, my work. My brain capacity was short.
Yeah.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.